Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, three big differences between last year's Timberwolves offense and this year's top five unit. Two are positive. One is really something to keep an eye on, but three major differences between last year and this year. It's all coming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. That's right. Locked On is the number one sports podcast network. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend and happy Timberwolves game day. We will preview the Wolves-Suns game toward the end of the show today. Phoenix, a lot better than many people, including myself, thought they would be. We'll talk about what's going on there, the matchup between the Wolves and the Suns later in the show. A lot to get to here in the first couple of segments, though. I want to get into the Timberwolves offense. Two of the bigger positive differences between last year's Timberwolves and this year's. We'll dig into the numbers a little bit, some of the lineups, pace of play, shot selection, and then we'll talk about one of the, I don't know if it's a red flag necessarily, but something, again, to keep an eye on here moving forward related to the Timberwolves lineups and specifically our guy Rob Dillingham, who's had a bit of a rough go here over the last few games since he's been a more regular part of the rotation. So we'll break that down. We'll also get into some ESPN trade piece articles. We're starting to get closer to actual trade season. We'll talk about that as well. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. All right. So there's three major things I want to hit here off the top. First, the pace of how the Timberwolves are playing. And of course, there's a lot of different places you can look at this. There's a lot of different metrics you can look at. Like, I mean, just straight up on Basketball Reference, just the quick and dirty pace statistic, which is essentially, I don't know, it's quick and dirty, right? It's an easy way to look at this. Last year, Minnesota was 24th. This season, right now, they're 13th. Okay. Now, I like using cleaning the glass for a lot of these numbers because cleaning the glass filters out garbage time, which there's been a lot of garbage time for Minnesota. They haven't really lost. They've only lost one actual close game, and most of their wins have featured a little bit of garbage time as well. It also factors out like end of quarter heaves and all that good stuff. So on cleaning the glass, Minnesota right now. So, well, side point here. Each of the last 2 years, and I think the last 2 years are the best years to look at for a lot of reasons, but like this is what, year 4 of Rudy Gobert. So if you go back 5 years, Chris Finch's first full year, there's no Rudy, team plays faster, very different vibe with Patrick Beverly, Jared Vanderbilt, the whole thing. Year 1 of Rudy was just a weird year. Minnesota was barely above 500. Remember, they were in the play-in. They didn't run at all, like played really slow. Then Chris Finch started pushing them to run more. 2 years ago, they win 56 games. They're the 6th seed. They beat Phoenix. They end up in the conference finals where they lose to Dallas. And then last season was more similar to 2 years ago. Obviously, the regular season wasn't as successful, although the playoffs ended in the same place. But the last 2 years, Minnesota didn't run very much. But when they did, they were pretty successful. And when they ran off of steals, they were very successful. This season, Minnesota's running a little bit more. They're actually middle of the pack in terms of transition frequency, but they remain in the top 3 in terms of success when they run in transition. That's been massive for the Wolves so far this year. They are still 18th overall in cleaning the glass in frequency of transition plays. So they're running on 15.7% of possible possessions. So it's not quite the same as the pace number on Basketball Reference, which, by the way, is 13th. They're 18th in transition on cleaning the glass, which is much higher than 27th last year and 28th the year before that. And, you know, just the overall frequency of when they run is up by almost 3%. The points plus per 100 possessions, which is points added per 100 possessions through transition play, they were 19th in the league overall last year, 16th the year before that. They're second this year, 4.7 points added per 100 possessions on cleaning the glass. They are number 2 off of steals, up over 13th last year, and they're 11th off of defensive rebounds. They have not finished in the top half of the league and running off of rebounds since 2018-19, which I don't even know how many coaches ago that was. Was that the year that Saunders took over for Tibbs midseason? It was forever ago. They were 25th last year and running off of live defensive rebounds. They're 11th so far this year. So they're second overall, up 17 spots from last year. They're second off of steals, up 11 spots from last year. And they're 11th off of live defensive rebounds, 14 spots up from last year. Just in terms of frequency, or I'm sorry, that's in terms of success. And then the frequency is also up at 9 spots overall. So that's like, and I think we can point to the lineup certainly as part of that. We'll get into Rob Dillingham here in a little bit, but like Rob Dillingham lineups are playing really fast. They're not super successful at all. In fact, they're the opposite of successful. They're pretty unsuccessful. But you can play around with the lineups. And like, honestly, coming into the season, I mean, Anthony Edwards is one of the guys who is slowing the Wolves' pace down. He likes to survey the floor. He likes to process. He likes to, pull up and hit threes. And, that's just kind of what he likes to do. He hasn't necessarily been a problem when it comes to pace this year. They're playing fast with Ant and without Ant. It's and honestly, like Rudy doesn't slow them down all that much either. They're less successful with Rudy on the floor on offense. But it's not like Rudy or Ant is like dragging down the pace with which they're playing. So I think that's number one. They're just running a lot more. They're having a lot more success in transition. And that's super important. Now, of course, I've talked about this a million times, and it's kind of basketball 101, but what are the shots you're going to get in transition? You're going to get to the rim. If you get to the rim, you're going to get more fouls, and you're going to get wide open 3-point shots. Guys sprinting to the corner, trail threes, even pull up threes in transition, and guys are backpedaling, whatever it is. It's not like it was 15 years ago. Guys aren't just running the 3-man weave down the floor. They're spacing out to the corners, and you have plenty of opportunities for spot up looks. Transition and off of offensive rebounds are the opportunities to get the most wide open threes. And we're seeing that a bit in transition for the Wolves. Another area where they've improved dramatically is this is kind of an interesting one, given what Chris Finch normally would try to do, and that is short mid-range jumpers, both in terms of frequency and accuracy, but accuracy is the bigger thing. Overall, Minnesota's shooting more mid-range jumpers than they have in 3 years. So year one of Rudy Gobert is the last time Minnesota shot this much from the mid-range. 41.5% of their overall shots are mid-range shots, according to Cleaning the Glass. They're actually 11th in the league in long mid-range jumpers this year, which is not, that's accuracy, not frequency. I mixed it up. But still, my opening point there was completely true. They have not shot this much from the mid-range in 3 seasons. They're 20th in the league in mid-range jumpers. They're shooting 28.1% of their shots. I was going to say 45% seemed like a lot. 28% of their shots are coming from the mid-range this year, which is still 20th in the league. Short mid-range, 21.8%. They're 16th in the league in terms of frequency of short mid-range jumpers. And they're making them at a higher clip. They're shooting less threes, but they're making those at a higher clip. The accuracy on three-pointers is up from where it was last year, only a little bit, but they're shooting less of them. They're just shooting more from the short mid-range, and they're making more of those shots. And Julius Randle and Jaden McDaniels are obviously the two guys to highlight there. Jaden is shooting 64.8% within 10 feet of the rim. And actually, like on Synergy, there's kind of this radius that they build out to either it's a 10-foot radius really from the rim, because it goes out to the edges of the lane and then out 10 feet in front of the rim. 64.8%, which is a really good number above league average. Randall 61.7% in that same area. And Randall, of course, has an even larger mid-range range, if you will. How far out from the rim he goes and sees success. In fact, if you look at his shot chart on Synergy, it's almost entirely green. The only area that he's not shooting great is the corners, essentially, and it's limited volume. But straight out from, basically straight from the basket out to the three-point line, he's over 50%. Actually, he's over 60%. That whole mid-range area, he's north of 50%, which is nuts. Again, relatively limited volume at this point. But the other thing is the frequency with which Randall's getting to the rim, getting to within just a few feet of the basket and scoring, and then also the accuracy with which he's shooting. Those are, of course, more efficient shots. They're not the same as step backs from 20 feet. If you're getting to the rim, you're getting to within 10 feet, that's going to be a shot that's easier to make. You're going to up your chances of getting fouled, which we've seen especially from Randle, but also from Jaden at times. And it's going to lead to more overall efficient offense. Now, it's a little bit of a dangerous game because that gets stretched out to 12, 14, 16 feet, and now it becomes less efficient. Then we don't see Jaden really shooting from there. We certainly don't see Nas shooting from there. That's more of a Julius Randle. If it's going to happen, it's Randle. It might be Ant. But for the most part, they've limited those shots a fair amount. And even though the three-point attempts are down a little, the accuracy's up a little. And that balances out a little bit. The free throw rate is up for Minnesota, in part because of the transition we've already talked about and the frequency of the short mid-range shots and the mid-range shots, if you will. So those are two dramatic changes. So far, we're only 15 games in, but there are two major reasons for Minnesota's offense going from middle of the pack to currently top 5 in the NBA. I want to talk about, on the flip side, I want to talk about some Rob Dillingham lineups, why they're struggling, the extent to which they're struggling. Talk about Rob a little bit specifically. We'll get into the ESPN trade article and we'll preview Wolves Suns. That's what we'll do here next to round out the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Quo. Let's talk about something that every business owner knows too well: missed calls. When a customer tries to reach you and can't get through, that's money slipping away. Quo, spelled Quo, is the smarter way to run your business communications so you never miss an opportunity. Quo is the #1 business phone system built for 2025, not 1995. It's simple, modern, and designed to help you communicate faster, look more professional, and stay connected wherever you're working. I love that Quo works right from an app on your phone or computer. No extra devices, no clunky landlines. Perhaps the best thing is that the built-in AI functions as an absolute game changer for you. It'll log your calls, write summaries, and even sets up follow-ups automatically. And if you can't answer, that AI agent of Quo's will jump in. It can qualify leads, route calls, and make sure that no customer is ever left hanging, even after hours. Try Quo for free at quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's Quo, QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. And yes, you can even keep your existing number. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is also brought to us by our friends at DoorDash. The NBA season's heating up. We're like 5 weeks in now. DoorDash has found the perfect way to keep fans in their bag all season long. Whether you're watching for the highlights, your fantasy team, or your favorite player or team, like the Timberwolves, DoorDash makes every game night even better. DoorDash is the official on-demand delivery platform of the NBA, and they're celebrating with something called the bag drop. Every time an NBA player scores 50 points in a game, DoorDash drops 50% off your order with Dash Pass the next day, and you're automatically entered for a chance to win the ultimate fan bag. We're talking player-inspired drip, exclusive gear, and stuff that you'll actually want. It's not just food either that you can get with DoorDash. You can get everything from snacks, drinks, headphones, ice, socks, whatever it is. You can get it all delivered to you with DoorDash. DoorDash has you covered for late night highlights, last minute watch parties, and double OT fuel up. So next time someone goes off for 50, I feel we're going to get an Ant 50-point game at some point this season. If someone goes off for 50, use the promo code NBA50, NBA50 the next day to get 50% off on DoorDash with Dash Pass, plus your shot at the bag drop. Dash Pass members only 50% off up to $10 the day after a 50-point game with promo code. Terms apply. No purchase necessary. Ends April 13th. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Visit DoorDashInYourBag.com for full details. DoorDash, in your bag all season long. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen of the day. And again, a big thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. We could not do it without you, the loyal listener. We could not do it without you making us your first listen every day. So a big thank you once again for that. All right. We've talked about two significant positive things: Wolves pace, Wolves making more and taking more short mid-range jumpers, getting to the line a bit more, and shooting the three well. I've combined those things into two things. And then the third thing that I think is notable are the extent to which the Rob Dillingham lineups are struggling. And this becomes, well, it's still a relatively small sample. It becomes more important as he sees more minutes. And we see guys like Jaden McDaniels. We don't know yet. He's questionable for Friday. He may or may not play tonight. It wouldn't shock me if they held him out another game, but we don't. I mean, they're off. They have 2 days off this weekend. They don't play again until Monday. So maybe you give him another few days. He ends up with a week off. We don't know. Phoenix is better than Washington, of course. Anyway, no Jaden, still no Terrence Shannon Jr. Of course, it's going to lead to some more Rob Dillingham minutes. Rob Dillingham lineups overall have not been very good. And I think that's an understatement. So if you just straight up look at the overall team offense with Rob Dillingham on the floor, Rob Dillingham lineups right now are a minus 4.8 in 242 possessions. That's a 34th percentile lineup, which is just the collective 5-man lineups with Rob Dillingham. If you look at Minnesota's lineups overall so far this season, among their 10 most used lineups, there are only 3 that are net negatives. And 2 of them include Rob Dillingham, and they're the only 2 that have Dillingham. I mean, those 2 lineups also have Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert, and Dante DiVincenzo, but they're the only 2 out of the top 10 most used lineups that include Rob Dillingham. The third negative lineup is Conley, DiVincenzo, Clark, Reid, and Gobert. The other 2 negatives are Dillingham, DiVincenzo, McDaniels, Reid, and Gobert, and Dillingham, DiVincenzo, Clark, Reid, and Gobert. Okay. Those are the only negative lineups in the Timberwolves' top 10 most used lineups. Going back to the specific Rob Dillingham lineups, the lineup that he's played with the most so far this season still only has 32 possessions together, and that's with DiVincenzo, McDaniels, Naz Reid, and Gobert. So the one I just mentioned, and actually his second most used lineup is, of course, the other one I already mentioned. His best lineup is with DiVincenzo, Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, and Rudy Gobert. And that's only 16 possessions, but it's a plus 56.3 per 100 possessions. So a very good lineup to this point. The only lineup with Anthony Edwards, or I should say the most used lineup with Anthony Edwards, is his 7th most used lineup, so it's only 11 possessions together. It's not very good. He has a 9 possessions with Ant that is good. So very small sample to this point. Like, there's no 2 ways about that. It just is. If we look at transition opportunities, which we talked about last segment, Rob Dillingham lineups are running 18.2 to be precise, percent of the time. That's an 88th percentile frequency of running. Remember, the Wolves as a team were like a shade under 16%. So they run more than 18% of the time with Dillingham on the floor, but they're a minus 0.5 per 100 possessions in transition opportunities. That's a 4th percentile offense. So they run way more often, but they're way less effective with Rob Dillingham on the floor. Without Rob Dillingham, we've already said the Wolves are running more, and they're super good at it when they do. So remember, 88th percentile in terms of frequency with Rob, 4th percentile with success in terms of success with Rob. Without Rob, they're only 35th percentile in frequency, 15% of the time instead of 18, but they're 94th percentile in terms of success, 5.8 points added per 100 possessions versus the negative 0.5 points added, in this case, points subtracted per 100 possessions with Dillingham on the floor. So they run more with Rob, but they're less successful when they do run with Rob Dillingham on the floor. Now, I do think a chunk of this is simply he's just pressing, he's missing shots, and it's one of those things where it goes back to the catch-22-ness of the whole thing. Like, dude's got to be on the floor if he's going to have success, but he's going to be on the floor less if he's not good when he's on the floor. Thankfully, Chris Finch is giving him some runway, and I think the schedule's allowing him to do that to an extent. We'll see against Phoenix. I forget who they play Monday. We'll look it up here in a minute, but it's a winnable game again before they get the Thunder next Wednesday night. There's a real opportunity for Minnesota to be 12-5 going to that Thunder game next Wednesday. And Rob Dillingham is going to get some leeway, going to get some opportunity and some leash to stay on the court. He has to this point. It hasn't gone super well. And as I said after the game the other night, or I guess it would have been yesterday's show, the process has actually been decent lately for Rob Dillingham. Like, he kind of looks the part. The shots just aren't going in. That's been the biggest problem more than anything else. So I appreciate what Chris Finch is doing, and I'm not like wringing my hands over the Dillingham thing yet, but I want him to keep getting these opportunities against some of these other opponents. Also, points per shot are really bad, which is kind of it's not a weird metric. It is a little bit of a weird metric. If you look at the player stats for the Timberwolves, no matter where you look, cleaning the glass, synergy, points per shot attempt, I think can be a pretty valuable number to just kind of get a sense for, like, what is this player adding, right? Like Conley's is really high because he mostly shoots threes, right? Dillingham's is a 0 percentile. He's only adding 67.4 points per 100 shot attempts. The Timberwolves have, they have 6 guys that are in the orange on cleaning the glass, meaning better than league average. And it goes for Conley, McDaniels, Gobert, DiVincenzo, Edwards, Randle. Naz Reid, Jalen Clark, TJ Shannon, Rob Dillingham are the guys who have enough possessions to qualify or enough minutes to qualify that are below league average. And Dillingham is the worst of the group. So, and by the way, he's not shooting the ball well at the rim either. I think I have that stat here. Yeah, he's shooting 45.5% at the rim according to Synergy, which is brutal. Obviously, you can't make less than half your layups, which is what that is essentially. So, we talked already, pushing the open floor. Some of these are relatively decent looks. Remember, he had his shot swatted when he went 1-on-3 a couple games ago. I think that was Monday's game against Dallas. Like, there's some of those moments for Rob. But overall, he's just got to convert some of these opportunities he has. All right. I want to talk ESPN trade article. Let's hit that quickly now before we look at Wolves Suns. So ESPN has an article, early trade deadline questions. What's next for Giannis? Lakers and top contenders is the headline because, SEO and stuff. The gist of this article is it's basically like what teams are missing, what they could possibly do, and what they think is next. Let's see who wrote this. This was just a collective NBA insiders piece. As expected for the Timberwolves, it says the Timberwolves are missing a point guard. Oh, I should mention, the reason why this is relevant now is because mid-December is when guys who sign in the offseason can be traded based on the trade rules. So there's a bunch of guys that become eligible to be traded on December 10th or December 15th, somewhere in there. I don't think there's anyone in the Wolves that qualifies for that, but there's a lot of guys league-wide that do. So we're getting into trade season where it starts to become a thing. We're 15 to 20 games in for everybody. So like, this is when teams start to say, okay, we're good, we're not good, whatever. So a good time to kind of start to take a look at this. The article talks about the Timberwolves are missing a point guard, and then it talks about how they can't really pull anything off because they can't take back more salary than they send out because they're over the first apron. And there's also no available first-round picks to trade. Under what's next, the article says, expect the Timberwolves to be linked to any starting point guard who might be available, such as John Morant, which we talked about. In fact, I think it was a week ago, last Friday's show. I did a show on Ja and why I didn't think the Wolves should do a trade for John Morant, and I don't think they will. But basically, you'd have to trade Naz Reid, Julius Randle, Jaden McDaniels. They're not going to trade McDaniels. I'd be shocked if they traded Naz Reid. And given how good Julius Randle's playing, why would you trade Julius Randle? It then says, this article says, speculation will swirl about Morant. It will be challenging for Minnesota to pull off a trade for an impact player because of the restrictions on the Timberwolves' future draft capital. It would probably require acquiring a player considered a distressed asset for Minnesota to make a major upgrade. I agree with that 100%. I don't think the Timberwolves should make a significant trade at any point this season because it would require a reshuffling. Now, part of the reason I think this is I think Minnesota will have a really good record on New Year's Day. I've said this since, preseason. I thought Minnesota would be 27-7 on January 1st. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it's probably more like 22-12 or 23-11 or something like that, which is very feasible still, which is a nice record. Nice enough that you're not going to be like, you know what? Let's trade our second best player. Let's shake it up because we might be better with John Morant, a guy who hasn't been healthy or stayed on the court for a full season in a long time. Like, they're not going to do that. This would be, if somehow they just play terribly over the next 6 weeks against bad competition, poor competition, then yeah, maybe they pull the trigger on something crazy, but I think it's pretty unlikely. And so I actually agree with this ESPN article. All right, let's close by looking at Wolves Suns. We'll preview the matchup for tonight. We'll do that here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, or both. I know I am. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup. You can play anywhere that PrizePicks operates. As long as there's a state where PrizePicks is, you can play. PrizePicks is fun on football Sundays. We got one of those coming up in a couple of days. We're also not far off from Saturday NFL, believe it or not. NBA tip-offs. You could play NFL and NBA at the same time, like last night, Thursday Night Football plus the Thursday Night NBA games. You could do it on Sunday. We got a few, matinee Sunday games as well for the NBA. You could pick your favorite players. Like, you might just say, hey, look, I think Steph Curry is going to have more 3-pointers in this game, where I think Anthony Edwards is going to score more points and have more assists, handling the ball more. The assist rate's down a little, but he's passing the ball more. Like, we're going to see more assists for Anthony Edwards. The other thing that's great about PrizePicks is the injury reboot. If one of your players leaves a game early with an injury, the injury reboot will save your lineup from a loss. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. All right. Let's close by looking at Wolves Suns. Phoenix was not supposed to be good this year. I predicted them to finish, let's see. Man, I really did. So actually, I hadn't looked at this. I knew I didn't think they'd be good. So I'm looking at my actual West finish prediction. I had Utah and the Pelicans as the worst two teams in the West, and Washington and Brooklyn as the worst two teams in the East. So far, so good on those. Not that was super hard. I was right on the top of the West. OKC and Denver, not quite as much on the top of the East. And I had Minnesota third, which, who knows when it's all said and done. Anyway, right now, I was off there. I had Phoenix as the third worst team in the West. That's not what we're getting right now. Now, that could change, but here's where I think I was wrong. I underestimated how functional the Suns starting lineup is. Like, it's a pretty good starting unit. Phoenix right now is only a game behind Minnesota in the standings. They're 9-6. They've won a few. Let's see. They've won 8 out of the last 10. They've got a point differential that's only a little worse than Minnesota. So if they beat the Timberwolves in this game, they'll be ahead of Minnesota in the standings because they'll have the same record, and we'll have the tiebreaker, obviously, then too. But it's a pretty functional starting lineup. It really is. Let's see. I lost my Phoenix roster here. Let me pull it back up. But like, obviously Devin Booker, of course, not having Kevin Durant anymore. Grayson Allen's been really good, although he's injured and questionable for this game. Royce O'Neal's played a significant role for them. They traded for Mark Williams finally in the offseason. Ryan Dunn has been good. It's a functional starting lineup. I was worried about their depth, and I think that's still ultimately going to be their downfall. They probably will be a play-in team, actually, at this point. Dylan Brooks, by the way, since he's gotten healthy, has been kind of a revelation for them. I've always liked/hated Dylan Brooks. I mean, nobody likes Dylan Brooks, but I've always thought he's an underrated player in terms of what he provides. And certainly there could be some addition by subtraction depending on the team that he was on. Didn't see that in Memphis. Might be seeing a little bit in Houston. It's amazing how swapping Dylan Brooks and Kevin Durant looks so much better for both teams at this moment. Again, 15 games into the season. All that to say, you tick off those guys I just mentioned, and I know Jalen Green's been out and will be out for a little while. I think he's never been quite as good as he's supposed to be, and I think that's addition by subtraction. Honestly, I hope he gets healthy and gets back, and I hope he has a great career. But to this point, Jalen Green has not been a positive winning player. So I think Phoenix evens out somewhere closer to 500 when it's all said and done. But they've been really good so far this season, which has surprised me a little bit. Over the last 2 weeks, Phoenix has the best offense in the NBA, and they're 5th in defense, believe it or not. The way their offense has been doing it, though, I think is a little unsustainable. There's a lot of pressure on their shots simply going in. They turn the ball over a bunch, and they don't shoot a lot of free throws. Usually those elements are pretty important. Remember, Minnesota's offense a couple years ago turned it over way too much. They ended up being a below middle of the pack offense, and they just did enough in the half court with Anthony Edwards and on the offensive glass, which they didn't do a ton of that year either, to be, to get to the conference finals, to win 56 games. But it was the defense that was driving that team. This Phoenix team is bottom 5 in free throw rate overall this season, and they're bottom 10 in turnover rate offensively. They just make a lot of shots. They're 8th in effective field goal percentage. They're a good offensive rebounding team. And again, they've gotten hot over the last 2 weeks. The best offense in the NBA over the last 2 weeks. The defense is middle of the pack, but 5th over the last couple of weeks. Just like with the Timberwolves, certainly, it certainly is true that the schedule has something to do with that, but you got to beat who you play. You got to beat who's on your schedule, who's in front of you. So yeah, over the last couple of weeks, they've beaten they've beaten the Pacers, they've beaten the Mavericks, and they've beaten the Pelicans. They also beat the Clippers twice. The Clippers have been much worse than they were supposed to be. They lost to the Warriors, but they did beat the Spurs. They also beat the Jazz. So since the winning streak started, The only good team they've beaten is the Spurs. And then, I mean, right now the Clippers aren't a good team. And then they just beat Portland, who's fine. So again, similar to Minnesota, you beat who you play. But I think coming into the season, I would have been like, all right, well, they're not going to win those Clippers games. They probably won't beat Dallas. They may not even beat the Pacers. But Phoenix has been better than advertised for sure. And the offense, especially over the last couple of weeks, has been pretty fantastic. So what are the keys for Minnesota? Well, I should also mention the other thing with Phoenix is they don't get to the rim at all, which is not unusual. This has been Phoenix for years. It's a Devin Booker team, right? So like, you look at the overall shooting. I'm going to pull up like against the rest of the league. They're shooting in terms of their frequency, like where they're shooting the ball. They are 28th in rim percentage. They only shoot 25% of their shots at the rim. Okay. They're sixth, or let's see. Yeah, they're sixth in mid-range jumpers. They're seventh in shooting three. So it's a jump shooting team. They're not a team that's going to get to the rim. They're not a team that's going to draw a ton of free throws. It's a Devin Booker team. They're accurate at the rim. They're accurate from three as well, like all the above, which is why the offense is really good. So make sure that stays the case. They're a good offensive rebounding team. The only way they're getting shots at the rim really is off of offensive rebounds in transition, and they don't actually play that fast either. So if Minnesota can control the glass, limit offensive rebounds, and contest the shots from the perimeter, they should be okay. Phoenix isn't trying to get to the rim anyway, so your perimeter defense doesn't need to be that fantastic. You just need to close out under control, not foul three-point shooters, close out under control, get a hand up, make them a little bit uncomfortable, make them feel you on the perimeter. They're not trying to get their head and shoulders past you and get all the way to the rim. They're not trying to get to the free throw line. Offensive rebounding, though, you do got to pay attention to, which, of course, we know has been a bit of a Achilles heel for Minnesota quite often. Mark Williams is a fantastic offensive rebounder. Nick Richards off the bench for them is a good offensive rebounder. Jordan Goodwin as a guard is a good offensive rebounder. You got to look out for all of those guys. And it worries me a little because Minnesota does tend to struggle with, checking some of these maybe surprising crashers from the perimeter, the 50-50 balls, some of that stuff that they're not consistent with. So that's my biggest concern in this game is Phoenix's offensive rebounding and the guys I just listed, being active on the offensive glass. They're top 5 in offensive rebound rate on Basketball Reference. I think they're like 8th on cleaning the glass. So the Timberwolves have to pay attention to that. Contest threes on the perimeter should be okay. Phoenix has been a good defensive team, but Minnesota's offense should still be able to overwhelm Phoenix defensively. As of right now, Minnesota's favored by 3.5 on the road in Phoenix on Friday night. I think this is a close game. I would probably take Suns plus 3.5. Honestly, I'm that worried about the offensive glass. I'm that worried about if Jaden McDaniels doesn't play, you're running out of guys to defend Devin Booker and to a lesser extent, Dylan Brooks and guys like that on the perimeter. So I think I could see the Wolves. I could see this being a very close game going either way, honestly. If I had to pick, I think the Wolves win by a bucket, by 1, 2, 3 points. I would take Phoenix plus 3.5 because I do think it's a really close game. And with that line and McDaniel's uncertainty, I don't mind Phoenix plus 3.5 on FanDuel if that's what you're looking at. But should be a fun game Friday night. Of course, the live postcast with Jack and Luke will be on Locked On Wolves, both on YouTube and on the audio feed. So be sure to tune into that. I will be back on Monday. We'll get you ready for Monday night's game. And I guess it won't be the post-game pod. It'll be 3 games after Wolves Phoenix. So we'll talk about any key takeaways from the weekend. We'll get you ready for the week ahead. Monday night, the Timberwolves are at Sacramento. Oh, I should also mention that Friday night is an NBA Emirates Cup game, which is significant. If the Timberwolves win, they'll be 3-0. And then that game against OKC next Wednesday's extra big because if they keep it close, if they win or they lose by a close margin, a thin margin, they would likely then be in the tournament portion of the Cup, which they have never done before in Vegas in December. So at Phoenix Friday, that's a Cup game. At Sacramento Monday is a regular game. And then at OKC on Wednesday night, Thanksgiving Eve, is a Cup game as well. All right, that's all I got for you today. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. A reminder for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Show with our guy, Josh Lloyd. He does an awesome job. You can find it on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, this show is also part of that very same podcast network. The #1 sports podcast network is Locked On. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.